will ever understand the connection between no self and Christ. What makes Bernadette Roberts so special? It is true most atheists will probably not be interested in reading or listening to 20 pages on the hypostatic union. It is true most Christians will probably not be interested in reading about how it is misguided to await their pie in the sky. It is true that most Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Taoists, etc. will probably not pick up a book on Christ. What makes Bernadette so special is that her worldview is so coherent, that she has meaningful insights for each of these groups of people. But so do lots of people. What makes her really special is her ability to write these seemingly opposed, to unite these seemingly opposed groups of people. Her writings represent an important, even necessary, purification of Christian doctrine. But so do the writings of many others. The difference is, unlike great theologians like Karl Rahner or Raimundo Panikkar, she was able to correct and update false beliefs based on her direct spiritual experience alone. For example, most dialogue between Christians and atheists gets stuck on the issue of God as a person. On this issue, Bernadette takes sides with the atheist, yet she says she knew God like the back of her hand. Why was she special? Because in trying to understand her tradition in terms of her experience and her experiences in terms of her tradition, she basically transcended both. One will look in vain for any teachings like hers anywhere in Christianity, because no self is not yet in Christianity. She was constantly accused of being a Buddhist, an accusation she repeatedly refuted. Alan Watts advocated an atheism in the name of Christianity. We are not the simple-minded folk of centuries past, yet the party line continues to present a watered-down version of the kenosis required of each of us. While most people simply leave Christianity, she couldn't, because of the role the Trinity, the Eucharist, and the Mother of Christ played in her life. Another thing that makes Bernadette special is her understanding of who and what the man Jesus was. Like Muslims and Jews, she did not believe the man was God. However, unlike them, she believed he was unique among all men in three specific ways. He was not revealed because he was not Christ. He was the instrument God used, like a lamb led to the slaughter, to reveal Christ. She was special because she was a devout, perhaps even militant Christian who did not believe Jesus was God. That alone, I think, merits a closer look. Because resurrection is a spiritual experience and has nothing to do with a rotting corpse, Bernadette said that it would not shake her faith one bit if they found Jesus' body somewhere in some tomb. It is not the corruptible which rises. She was special because she came up with this one key that unlocks so many mysteries of Christianity. The key is this: he had to manifest what we will only experience. He was not God, and his physical body did not rise. Yet resurrection and ascension follow immediately after every death, because he revealed humanity to humanity, and how it went for him is how it goes for each of us. She was special because if she was right about that, then where else can we look to understand how death, resurrection, and ascension will go? Jesus could never have explained how the mystery of death works. Some people would not have understood or believed him anyway, words being subject to error. Instead, it was the wisdom of the plan to reveal or manifest, rather than tell or explain. And, at least by the time of the agony in the garden, if not sooner, he understood he really didn't have a choice in this matter. Personally, I tend to think he came to understand this about 2 seconds before setting his face toward Jerusalem. Why are there so many typos and repetitions in her writing, and repetitions and interruptions and endless rabbit trails in her speaking? Because she was working with the mind of Christ, which is not suited to this world. In other words, self is for this world, and no self is not. If you have been paying attention, you will have noticed that she was not working with the mind of Christ, because there was no she there, and Christ is not a who. Our language around these things is so antiquated and clumsy that it all but prohibits a correct understanding. The first thing you need to get straight is that who you are is not what you are. Jesus was a human who, a human person. Christ is what he was and what he became ever more perfectly, not who he was. Why is B so important? Well, did you ever wonder what your last day on earth might be like? You are about to find out. Here she explains how after the death of self, after the revelation of the true nature of the body, called resurrection, and the earthly Christ, comes the revelation of the ascension, called the heavenly Christ. This is what it feels like to transition into God's dimension of existence. She explains a little why the ascension is so overlooked by Christians today as having any relevance for their own lives. This is something that God wanted to reveal to humanity, but which humanity has completely missed because of our insistence that Jesus must return in a visible body. The ascension reveals exactly the opposite. Why is Bernadette Roberts important? Because based on her experience, she is often saying that the truths of Christianity are often the opposite of how they are presented. Basically, she is just being very specific about how consciousness ceases to function. I review this a little in my first book called God's Big Experiment. The leaving of consciousness happens in the reverse order that consciousness arose. When it arose, first came a sense of being, then life, then the affective or emotional self, then the reflexive and reflective or intellectual self. As it outwears its usefulness, first to go is the intellect, then the emotions, both of which happened on the cross, then the sense of life, the resurrection, then the sense of being, the ascension. Pay attention and enjoy. One would be hard-pressed to make the case that Bernadette was some kind of closet Sufi or something, or even that she thought Islam was a good religious path. To my knowledge, she only ever said 3 things about Islam, none of which are in her books. The first is a joke she made about not wanting to talk too much about the Prophet Muhammad for fear of assassination by terrorists. This joke, made at that time in history, I believe was intended to poke fun at the ridiculous religious and political situation in which that body continued to function. The second reference to Islam was when she said of the revelation received by the Prophet Muhammad, "I can't help but think God had something to do with that." Based on my recollections of various things she said about the history of revelation, I think this is what she meant. She was not particularly interested in the Quran, Islam, or the Prophet Muhammad. She was interested in the ongoing revelation of God. She was drawing parallels, microcosm, macrocosm, between the spiritual life as experienced individually with how it is experienced collectively, that is to say, as a species. So, after carefully explaining the revelations of the transcendent, immanent, and omnipresent, and the distinctions within the triune nature of the Absolute, she says, quote, "And then Islam came on the scene." What she meant is that after one sees the Trinity, or even knows it like the back of their hand, as she claimed to have known by age 15, it is a further revelation and therefore came later in time than the Trinity, to see that they are, in fact, one. The third reference to Islam is from her 9-hour-long lecture series called The Essence of Christian Mysticism. She tells the story of a woman from Berkeley, California, quote, "wouldn't you know it, a bunch of radicals," end quote,